Welcome, everyone. It is Wednesday, October 9th, almost Election Day. It is welcome to Direct Line. Our special guest tonight is Ethan Gutmann from the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation, as well as our special guest host filling in for Mark Unkefer, who's on the road to Constantinople. Welcome, Bonnie Glick, to the Direct Line microphones. And you all know the hostess, the mostest, Jackie Saxton. Take it away, guys.
Welcome to the Jewish takeover of Direct Line Live, where we'll be talking about our favorite topic, which is China. There's no food involved, unfortunately. So I am very much not the expert between Bonnie at USAID and Ethan from Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation. So I'm mostly going to be listening and learning as these two talk about what's going on in Taiwan and probably asking the questions that you all are too afraid to ask because they might sound dumb. So take it away, guys.
Wait a minute. I got a question for Jackie right off the bat. Jackie, if you speak Chinese, which you do, or you did 8 years of this, that's what you were saying. Now, you learned that in Taiwan, isn't that right?
Yeah, I did go to China in high school.
Oh, you did go to China. Okay.
Yeah, but we didn't go to Taiwan. We went to Beijing, Chengdu, and Shanghai.
Okay, so you're the latter generation. It used to be traditionally people went to Taiwan to learn their Chinese. They came back with this very kind of courtly sound to their Chinese.
And we learned from a textbook and then toboggan down the side of the Great Wall. It was great. Okay, right.
Mind you, I'm an observer on this. I can't do anything with the language, but go ahead. I can order in Chinese though, just like you, Jack. It sounds good.
Very good. I'd like a pizza, please, if you can order that in Chinese.
Yeah. Hot dog. Yeah.
It's my pleasure, Ethan, to have you with us on Direct Line tonight, and it's big shoes to fill with Mark on the road to, as Dwight says, Constantinople. And Jackie and I are thrilled to have you here, especially since tomorrow is October 10th, and that is Taiwanese National Day. And as we start a conversation about Taiwan, which of course involves a discussion about the People's Republic of China as well, instead of looking back, Ethan, I'd love to look forward and get a sense from you. There's a lot of back and forth among people who focus on the what some people like to call the great power competition that the United States has with China. I personally don't call it that because that implies we're playing the same game by the same rules. But the rivalry, we'll call it, that we have with the People's Republic of China and where Taiwan fits into that. There's a lot of discussion given Russia's invasion of Ukraine, given the weakness that the United States demonstrated in Afghanistan, and given our inability, our seeming inability to support the good guys in the battle of civilization versus barbarism in the Middle East, which for anyone who wonders, we're not supporting Israel sufficiently against Iran and its proxies. People are wondering, I'm sure a lot of our friends in Taiwan are wondering, what would the United States do should there be a Chinese military engagement with Taiwan? I'm deliberately not saying invasion because Taiwan is an island and will be and is very fortified, will be very hard to invade. China does have the largest standing army in the world. But I'd love to get your thoughts as a true China-Taiwan expert on how things look from the position of people in Taipei. What are their concerns and what are their plans?
I think there's several different things going on. One is this is going to be an unusually complex topic, and I don't like to make topics complex. I like to make them simple and get to the cut. It's not like that, though. Taiwan is extremely confident right now. Their GDP, depending on how you measure it, per person, their GDP has now surpassed Japan's. That is, they are the richest people in Asia, pretty much. Okay, wow. With the exception maybe of Singapore. I mean, maybe Singapore or something, but of real countries, this is significant. and that actually happened when I was there 2 years ago, at least, and it's now people are starting to recognize this. Look, so from their perspective, many ways, and they know that they are sitting on these computer chip factories. Okay, for you don't need to get technical about it, but and you shouldn't get technical about it because, in fact, making the computer chips the way they do is not a technical. It's not a technical thing. It's an art. Nobody can quite figure out how to do it. They can't do it in China. We can't do it. The Israelis can't do it. Okay, no one can do it except them. All right, and that puts them in an amazing position in some ways. If there were to be a war, and China and Taiwan were to blow up its chip factories or even try to move them, they won't successfully move them. They blow them up ultimately. Right. The world for at least 5 years will go into a kind of eclipse. We'll literally stop having progress. The progress that we're used to in the computer world will disappear for at least 5 years and maybe 10. Okay, that's puts them in. It's a strange position. I mean, even Israel wasn't in this position. Okay, it's a very successful economy. Now, figure out one more thing. You put Ukraine and Israel together, and you get a GDP. Their GDP doesn't even come close to Taiwan's. So why can't Taiwan defend itself? This is sort of the mystery of it. And part of it is they don't spend that much. They're only spending 1.5% to 2%. Ukraine was spending 2.5%, almost 3% before the Russian invasion. Israel was spending 5% and taking a lot of heat for that. But it turns out money extremely well spent. We can see that now. So that's kind of the puzzle in this situation. I mean, in terms of American policy, I don't want to give everything away, but my honest feeling is that it's an unusual policy. I don't want to sound Biden-esque here, but I would actually want a policy of kind of ambiguity for one simple reason. We want to push them as hard as we can to get them used to this idea that the United States helps defend those who defend themselves, who can create that they cannot just set up some magic tripwire that America is going to walk into. And clearly, obviously, it depends on the election. If Kamala Harris were to be elected, that tripwire wouldn't work anyways. Okay, so but it's not true. And Trump's ambiguous as well in his own way. Okay, he's very tough, but he's ambiguous, and that's not actually such a bad position if you are trying to convince a country to come on, pony up the ante. And that's what we're looking for from, I think, American policy should be looking for from Taiwan.
So sticking on the whole point then of the election, what role does this timing have in what China could be considering in terms of when's the right time? Do they not care who wins? Do they do it in that time after November 5th, but before January 20th? Or does it depend who wins the race?
Well, it looks like we passed at least for now, for this moment, we passed the period of maximum danger, which was clearly precipitated. Hey, Bonnie, do you disagree with me here? I mean,
no, I think that's
Afghanistan set off everything. Okay, that was the match. I mean, I really wish people would just say this over and over 100 times because they're not looking at the world from the authoritarian frame of view. The mindset is that, aha, there we go.
Yes.
People falling out of planes, America surrendering, America flying helicopters that we've seen before in Vietnam. That's it. Now's the time to move, right? And people leave a lot of flack to the Ukrainians for various reasons, but I believe they kind of saved the world with their bare hands in a funny way by putting up the resistance they did initially. Anyways, now they're. I don't feel quite as strongly about them losing a little bit of territory to make some deal here, but because there was always kind of a somewhat arbitrary territorial conglomeration. But here's the thing, and the Israelis, who did not crumple initially, kind of didn't look very good, but now they've come roaring back. I mean, as a Jew, I'm feeling. I'm walking around feeling really great these days. Okay, ever since the pager attack, it was like, okay, we're back.
That was like legendary.
Yeah.
Legendary, unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it. No military story.
No one has.
No, it's
Right.
absolutely amazing. And the Taiwanese are perfectly capable of doing things like that. These are brilliant people. They don't
Yeah.
think that way, and they need
Right.
to be thinking that way. And right from the beginning, Taiwan's always had a problem because it sort of said, okay, our model is to go to the United States and have them sell us these expensive planes with pretty good stuff, good materials, and that's how we'll defend ourselves. Israel looked at it a different way. They said, okay, maybe America will be there, maybe it won't. But what we're going to do is create a military-industrial complex, and we're going to make it really big. What do we need? And we'll sell off bits of that military-industrial complex all over the world, even to the Turks, right? Betray them
Ironic,
second of every day, right? We'll sell it off, and that will fund the whole thing, so we don't go broke because of our military needs. Well, that turned out to be the right strategy, and Taiwan's the wrong strategy. And the fact that Taiwan's still here is a kind of miracle, because if the Chinese had gone first, not Putin, who knows?
Right.
Who knows, really, what would have happened? And it's not clear that we really would have come fully to Taiwan's defense, especially if they'd done a kind of a slow squeeze, what the Chinese have done, slow squeeze. Now it's different. Every day that you're in Taipei, and those planes go flying around and breaking the airspace and all that, it doesn't upset people, or shouldn't upset people that much, because every day they do that, the Japanese defense budget ticks up a point.
Yeah.
Every time. Just every time. And that is ultimately has to be part of the defense here. Again, I'm not into the big, okay, we've got to put this big coalition together and we'll lead from behind. No, but in this case, I mean, Japan is potentially a very powerful country here, and enough to make a huge counterweight. And then you come in with our Navy and our submarines, and it makes it impossible to make that invasion, just like you said, Bonnie. It really does.
Right.
I mean, if America's willing to put its subs in the middle of the Taiwan Straits and fire, that's it. It's over. Okay, there's nothing the Chinese can do. So it is a question of willpower, and then you get into Chinese domestic politics, and we're off to the races then. So the topic gets even more complicated.
I think that we'll delve into a little bit of the complication, just because we should keep it spicy. But I think too, one of the things that you said in terms of a willingness to invest and a capacity to invest, the distinction that I think a lot of people see between Israel and the Israeli Defense Forces in Taiwan and their military is seriousness versus really a lack of seriousness. Israel has mandatory draft for men and women. 80+% of the population serves, which is the singular thing that has really shown the world the exemplary power there. Whereas Taiwan, which also has mandatory military service, you don't serve 3 years, you serve under 12 months, if I'm not mistaken.
That's exactly right. Man.
And that's not enough to do a lot of serious drilling and experience also the very tight-knit community that's formed among soldiers. Right. So in Israel, which is less than half the size of Taiwan population wise, they have a much larger military. And Taiwan, I think, has begun to tick up its military budget. But until there's a real seriousness about Taiwanese citizens defending Taiwan, China still views the aperture as open.
This is that's a very good analysis of exactly where the problem lies. I think there are these polls out there that are not published. They've been I can't really say how I got a hold of them, but I did get a look at them. And they were just done of young people of fighting age in Taiwan. And there's a lot of problems with polls, okay? But the fact is that they're ready to fight. They came through much more aggressively than I would have expected.
Interesting.
Okay? Yeah, and and it is also true that in the elections, okay, and here we get into the that level of detail, sort of inside baseball, but the DPP, the Democratic Progressive Party, which is the Green Party, probably who we wouldn't sort of want to vote for in some ways here, wins over the KMT, the Kuomintang, which is much more sort of conservative party, except that they're widely perceived as very eager to make a deal with Beijing because most of them are from the mainland initially, and they just have that kind of that mainland culture a little bit. The separatist DPP keeps winning, even though they're probably not as people will hate me for saying this, but they're probably not as competent administrators as the KMT. Okay, I prefer to sort of my congressman to be a KMT guy, sort of that kind of thing. I'm not sure I want the president to be. I don't have to vote in that election, but I'm just saying, and they won't let me in that election. But the point is, this is where it gets. That's a sign that there is a kind of. They're willing to take some chances, the Taiwanese people, for what they believe in, and that's often not recognized. There's a sort of the idea is, well, you don't see these rallies in the street and so forth. Well, this is a courtly country, which is all about understatement, right, Jackie? I mean, right, Bonnie? I mean, that's what it is. And so you're not going to see those kind of demonstrations. Those demonstrations kind of a bad taste in their mouth because they were done during the, when it was really an authoritarian state. Okay, that's when you saw all those rallies and torchlight and so forth and all that stuff. That was done as when they were still intending to take back the mainland. Now they've said, no, we're our own country. Okay, that's who we really are, and most of the population isn't really straight off Chinese. They speak Chinese, but okay. So I think there are some signs that Taiwan is actually a fairly legitimate country, and just like Israel, which was at its throats. I mean, when October 7th happened, they will come together. Okay,
right?
And we've learned that can happen. In fact, I for years mocked the sort of New York Times theory of war, which is, people start wars to unify their people, and I've always said that's nonsense. That's not a democratic thing. That's an authoritarian thing, right? Okay, in democracies they always get in trouble especially when you start an unnecessary war, or what is perceived to be an unnecessary war, like as Vietnam often was. Now, this is different. We're actually seeing the New York Times theory of war actually sort of coming true in Israel, right? It kind of brought the sides together, not perfectly, not perfectly.
Well, and also they didn't, right? And they didn't start the war. They didn't
start the war. That's key. They didn't start the war, but definitely, Taiwan's not going to start this war with China.
No way. No
so
way.
That's not going to happen. So it will unify people. You'll find blues and greens working together, okay, and fighting together, not fighting against each other. This is, we in the United States have been constantly looking for this third force, okay? What Graham Greene in The Quiet American, written back in the 50s, called the third force, that we're always looking for something which isn't quite the blue or the green, but it's something else, because we see that the conflict between these two parties is kind of sterile. And what I was hoping to do tonight a little bit is talk about what happened with that third force, because it's turned out to be an abject failure. Okay, so in a sense, it simplifies things, because when you have a country which can defend itself, which actually has the money to do most of the defense, the bulk of the porcupine defense, the initial ability, stopping the missiles coming in and so forth, I think that's something to be encouraged as much as possible. And the last thing we want, every time I was asked this in Taiwan, people would say, how do we convince the lawmakers? How do we get to Senator Cotton? How do we get to these very people that they thought were influential? And I said, you're going to the wrong capital. You should be going to Kiev. You should be going to Jerusalem. That's where you should be getting how are you guys doing this? Okay. this is the amazing thing. And I'm really hoping, I mean, I genuinely hope that if Trump is reelected and China will have missed this window of opportunity that is closed.
Yeah.
And they may think, okay, we're going to put it off till 2026. But hey, supposedly California was supposed to be all electric cars by 2000. I remember that.
2030, yeah.
Okay, so who knows? And I'm not sure that Xi Jinping is in good shape. I don't know what you think, Bonnie. But
Well,
I'm not sure he's going to.
Right. He's not young. He's a spring chicken relative to when we were talking Trump versus Biden. I think he's like 70 or something. But he's that still is not youthful.
No.
And he was seen during the party Congress wheeling out elderly Hu Jintao. And it makes him look sprightly and young when he does something like that until it happens to him by someone younger than he is.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I think it'll be everything is, from my perspective on China, everything is much more political than military, in the sense that the games that China plays are the games of a schoolyard bully to box Taiwan in and make Taiwanese citizens extremely nervous. If China were to have some sort of confrontation with Taiwan, it would be an economic attempt to squeeze. I'm going to use the term you used, Ethan, to squeeze Taiwan. The squeezing is, however, to China's detriment, because Taiwan, even though we don't love it, Taiwan exports a lot of their chips to China. And China still depends on Taiwan economically. Until they are independent of a need for the island, their best bet is to just keep the Taiwanese extremely, uncomfortable and in their box.
Yeah, I think that's but I guess what I was thinking about with Xi Jinping a little bit is something I normally never do, which is think about maybe the Communist Party is really going to knock him out. And maybe there will be, I would never say this before, but maybe there will be some sort of reform. I mean, I'm just looking at the Chinese economic, not the figures, because the figures are always coming through this prism of but everything we're learning about real figures of unemployment, now that they've stopped publishing them, we start to get some real accuracies. Okay. So many signs of economic decline, and it doesn't look that temporary. I mean, the way it's been explained to me is that everybody in Asia, all the tiger economies and everything, went through COVID, and then they got this big boost right after COVID, which is what happened all over the world, except to China. They got a little boost, okay?
Right.
A really little boost, and then they started declining again. And they're in some ways worse than they were during COVID, which is phenomenal. So we've never seen an economy kind of do this. It's like, you're telling me they hit a Japan era sort of maturity in their economy this quickly? That's a disaster. If you talked about rising expectations,
yes, among young people in particular. Yeah.
Well, that's the point, right? Because China has to deal with the consequences of their actions in terms of having the ban on how many kids a family could have. They have a rapidly aging population that is eventually going to die off, and they don't have the number of people to replace that population who are going to be virile enough to fight in a war or an invasion, or continue keeping up the pace of labor for the GDP to sustain itself.
That's absolutely right. That's a problem for them, because they're going to reach a zero replacement very, very quickly, and they're actually kind of reaching that now.
Yeah,
So,
and their
and the
population was
assumption, the Maoist assumption was always we could do the one-child policy when we want to. Boom, there'll be this population explosion the minute we lift it or are allowed to. That turned out not to be true because of a certain amount of money coming in, yet it's not enough money. And
right.
so what we're seeing is I don't know, it's a sort of it's the cat chasing its own tail. It's really kind of awful to watch. Chinese are a great people. They're very creative people, and it's in many ways there's a lot of human tragedy going on there. An entire generation's hopes and dreams being kind of just wiped out. Okay, and now maybe that'll lift, but I don't think so, and I think Xi Jinping is partially responsible for a lot of that because of his retrenchment into traditional Communist Party activities, right? And his inability to give any kind of intellectual freedom in the society. And so that's, of course, cut them off. So the best they can come up with is TikTok. Okay, great. You got TikTok. Okay, you got TikTok. Okay. But you don't get anything else.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, but I've never seen this behavior before. And I've never been a coming collapse of China kind of guy. All right. As somebody who lived there, I was always like, oh, give me a break. These people can get through anything. All right. Even if the government's doing anything wrong, they'll figure out a way to make money off that. Okay. They're brilliant entrepreneurial people. And right now that's not showing anymore. There's just complete loss of confidence.
Is that in part, Ethan, do you think, due to the way Xi Jinping really clamped down during COVID? Part of the reason that there was a boom in economies around the world is they were stagnant, and then suddenly the cuffs were off and they could become dynamic again. But the cuffs never really came off in China, and there are two dynamics at play, I think. But you're truly the expert.
No, I'm not.
That's
I'm not. The economy baffles me actually right now.
Well, yeah,
Okay.
the economy is baffling, but the people too. Jackie, this is to your point of the one-child policy. The one child is by and large male, right? They have a terrible discrepancy there between males and females, so that makes it kind of hard to reproduce. But they also culturally are softer than the Chinese communists that I grew up with. Right, that sense of China has to be number one. China has to, and our ideology and our sociology have to dominate the world stage. And we will do it coming from the South as a developing country, and we will show the Americans who's the boss. And it feels like that oomph and vigor is not as present in the younger generation of the people who are sort of 50 years and younger.
Well, I think it would be if China was having more success. That's all. I mean, I think if the economy was in a reasonably steady pace, and frankly, I don't think it helps seeing Ukraine defeat Russia or hold Russia at a standstill. I don't think it helps to see the Iran and getting a bloody nose. I think this is cut into Chinese nationalism in a way. They're also looking at the same things we're looking at, which is the incredible wealth of the Taiwanese. That's a language they can speak. And as much as you try to cut off the internet from all the outside world, you don't have to cut off CNN because they don't want to watch it there either. Just like we don't want to watch it. Okay, it's like, but you can't cut it. They do want to read what the Taiwanese have to say, and it's so obvious that there was a period, and I was in it. I was in mainland China at the time, where a guy I kind of really liked, a kind of analyst. He was sort of a political and social analyst, and he really was a kind of a genius. And I went to his office one day and sort of said, I just wanted to talk to you about nationalist trends and, and the young people and so forth. And he turned into a maniac on me. He sort of suddenly the mask came off, and he sort of his devil was revealed, and he started going, we're getting even with everybody. we're going to crush the British, not since the Opium Wars, we're going to surpass them. And he said in Taiwan, Taipei's looking a little bit shabby these days. They're done. It's like we're going to, pass them. It was like Khrushchev, the Nixon debate or something, the Kip debate.
Yeah.
Saying bye-bye, and we will wave to you as we go by you. It's like unbelievable. Well, I've never forgotten that moment. And of course, that's not what happened. Okay?
Right.
Taiwan got wealthier than they did, much significantly so. And that wasn't supposed to happen. So there's a lot of things that were not supposed to happen. And the one thing that did seem that was going according to the sort of Chinese Communist Party view of the world was the weakness presented by Biden in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And then his subsequent inability to sort of roll with the punches to say, what, foreign policy is kind of fluid. You don't always have to say, everybody, please, back to your places, exactly where we were before this all happened. You don't have to do that. You have to move. Yeah. Okay, wars happen. Okay, and you try to get some advantages out of them. You try to think of more like a chessboard. All right, none of that. There's no creativity at all whatsoever in that foreign policy. So I think the Chinese really saw an opportunity there, but the Russians went first, and maybe they even went first without permission, and they did badly, and that led to Xi Jinping, as moronic as people claim. I have no idea if he's a genius or a moron, but I'm told by people who actually have worked with him that he's a moron, and they're Chinese people, mainly Chinese. Okay, and they're taking a little bit of a chance telling me that, although it's in Taiwan. The fact is, if he is a moron, he was enough of a smart guy to recognize maybe if the Russians were lying about their own tanks and armored fighting vehicles and the tires on those, which were actually bought from China. They weren't supposed to be bought from China. Okay, when the first invasion was happening and they were heading towards Kiev, marching towards Kiev, and they kept getting stuck. And they couldn't leave the road. They couldn't leave that road. That was the main problem. So that's why they were shooting. It was a duck shoot for these drones that the Ukrainians had bought from Turkey. So there they're going. The drones are killing them. And it turns out all the tires are from China. They just saved the money and bought vodka with it or something for the Russian army or for the generals by getting these cheaper tires. Well, it turns out, of course, that's what happened in the rocket forces, right? In the strategic rocket forces. In fact, it turns out that the strategic rocket forces can't launch in many cases because there's water in the tank, not gasoline or the equivalent. I'm sure it's a very fancy form of gasoline. I don't know what kind it is. But I know that you're supposed to have the ability to fuel those things up very quickly. And it turns out they're just keeping water, and they didn't even have the fuel reserves in many cases. Okay, that's pretty disturbing. That doesn't put you in a good position for a war, for an invasion of Taiwan. And so a lot of heads have rolled in China. And we don't know fully what that means yet, except that now that may be just part of Xi Jinping's control freak quality. He's the worst kind. I mean, the mediocre leader who comes in, who doesn't really feel like he's smart, was put in because he sort of would satisfy both factions, or people thought that the Communist Party would tell him what to do. They're the worst and most dangerous kind of leader.
Boy, that sounds really similar to another current world leader I know.
Who could that be? Who could that be? I mean, I think it's, I'm sure, I'm sure Kamala will listen to everything Obama has to say, and we'll just do it.
That's basically why they kicked Bernie out, so Biden could become president.
So that's kind of the same thing we're seeing with him. Now, and the same thing, but the same problem is there, because then somebody whispers in Biden's ear, "No, you're not a transitional figure. You're FDR." Okay, and that's it. Okay, and he's off to the races, right? And then he's like, "Well, I'm FDR, and I'm giving a speech on September 11th, so I need you to get out of Afghanistan completely before I give this speech." I mean, this is sort of like, that's crazy stuff, right? And so this is and we've seen that with Xi Jinping too. He's made a lot of irrational decisions.
What does a post-Xi Jinping China look like? Because it's not, I'm not naive enough to think that there's going to be a free and fair election in China, and you might get a non-communist in there, right? There's, I'm sure, already wheels in place for who takes over next.
Are you asking me a question or?
Well, yeah, but I mean, I guess so. For whoever I guess is appointed or
to
take over after Xi Jinping, do the ideals change? Does their stance towards Taiwan change? Does anything change at all?
I don't know, but I do know that the problem partly, I would say one thing about that is that I trying to predict what's going to happen in China is crazy talk. Okay. You shouldn't do it really because you're going to be wrong like 50% of the time. But it is true that China does move like an amoeba going towards acid. They hit some acid and it turns around and goes the opposite direction. All right, this is the way it works. Other than that, it's like watching paint dry, as I've always said. Okay, it's like the dullest leadership conflicts in the world. But here's one thing that is true. I think Xi Jinping made it his issue. Nobody forced this on him. Nobody said you must bring Taiwan back into the fray at exactly this time. Okay, there was every reason to sort of say, give them time. We'll give them some candy. We'll give them some flowers. Eventually, they'll come to the fold. And instead, he ruins Hong Kong. Okay, which made it basically impossible to do it anyway, but invading. All right, and then now that's the situation he finds himself in. Well, that's his problem in a sense. And if you were to bring in the usual troika of Communist Party apparatchiks who are sort of risen through and one of them you're supposed to love, one you're supposed to hate, and one you're supposed to feel indifferent for. I mean, it's a very sort of set up procedure. they set up these things.
But it's formulaic.
It's very formulaic, right, Bonnie? I mean, it's so funny when you see expats falling into this. I'm sure. Who's that guy who's running with Kamala Harris? Waltz. I'm sure he did the same thing, Okay, but the point is we have, they'll bring in somebody like that, and then they don't really have to own the Taiwan issue the same way. They can call it kind of one of the mistakes. And there's a way to climb down from it, which probably would be a good idea for China right now, especially if Trump's elected. I don't think you want to test that guy too far. Okay, he obviously doesn't like war, but who knows? Okay.
Right. I think we had that same kind of strategic ambiguity with President Trump, although, he would call it strategic ambiguity and he'd play around with it on the margins a little. With Biden, a journalist throwing him a question as he's walking by in the hallway and only half hears it and it's already 90% gone to take as fact that we will support Taiwan based on the dodderings of a senile old man is not the safest strategy to have. If I'm sitting in Beijing, I'm ignoring it because I know exactly what it is. But if I'm sitting in Taiwan, I certainly don't feel more comfortable hearing Biden say, yeah, we'll back Taiwan, and then have his advisors immediately walk back everything that he's saying.
I think, I wonder, I have a kind of a checklist of a couple of small ball suggestions for this, even though I'm not giving the big one. I kind of agree with a certain amount of strategic ambiguity, as long as it's not on China's terms. In other words, all this nonsense about one China, two China. I hate that stuff. Okay. And I really think the more I even give Biden some credit for just going, no, we're going to defend him, whatever, whatever, we're definitely going to do it. And then his advisors go, well, he didn't mean it that way. So, okay. I mean, a little more straight talk would be one thing, but that's kind of minor. I think the main thing is we have to send a high profile U.S. military advisor to Taiwan, and he's got to advise their army. Okay, their army, their navy, their air force. And the reason he's got to do that is because the army specifically does not get along with the Greens, the DPP, the ruling party right now. And the reason they don't, because the army shot a lot of them 28 years ago or so, 25 years ago approximately, shot a lot of them. Fairly cold blood. I mean, they were having a demonstration. It was still an authoritarian state. The party wasn't truly established. And they killed a bunch. And ever since then, they mistrusted each other. And that is that reasoning, that is why we have what we have, which is this kind of, we have this nightmare scenario that Taiwan's just going to fall apart the minute a Chinese invasion begins. Because one hand doesn't really work with the other. So the way out of that is for us to just send this U.S. military advisor. And
do you have someone in mind who would be the right person to?
I'm joking. No, I don't have anybody in mind, actually.
But someone out of Indo-PACOM, conceivably, for whom this is.
Met a guy I thought was pretty good in Taiwan. I think he's a little crazy sometimes, but in a way he'd be sort of the right guy.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be. It's better if it's somebody probably more high profile than that. And so it indicates something about U.S. serious. You stop talking about how serious you are. You just do this. The second thing is, for God's sake, let's get a defensive weapon system with joint U.S.-Taiwan development. Okay. Much the way we really did that with Israel. I mean, we kind of fell into it with Israel. It was very natural, right? That's how the Iron Dome was developed, right? But the slingshot was Israel's, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe a slingshot. We don't even know how to use that technology, is my understanding. I may be wrong about this.
We've never had to.
We never had. Well, we might in the future. So maybe we should start thinking about it.
You think?
And definitely Taiwan's going to need it because the mainland's bristling with missiles. So some kind of defensive weapon system for joint Taiwan development, and get them used to the idea that you can actually sell this stuff later too. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. There's, unless you're a total peacenik, there's nothing wrong with selling weapons if you have, as a way of financing your own defense. It is a reasonable and legitimate way to do it. The Israelis have proved that. I don't think they're an immoral country for doing what they've done. Okay. I didn't like it though when they were selling certain technologies to the Chinese, and especially surveillance technologies. But I've had my arguments with them about it. Whatever. The last thing is, Taiwan should be the information war headquarters of the world when it comes to China. In other words, they're the natural global center for research into the mainland. They speak the language, they understand how these people think, and they're not doing it. Okay,
they're not doing it.
They're not doing it, and we don't. In the intelligence agencies in America, understandably feel like, well, hey, they're riddled with spies. We don't really want to get too involved. You got to take some risks sometimes. Sometimes you have to reach out to another country, much the way U.S. has worked with Mossad at certain times. Okay, at certain levels they have,
right,
and it has worked to the benefit of both countries and the benefit of the world. And this is a similar kind of thing where I think the U.S. intelligence has to get over that a little bit. And those, if we were to do just those three small ball things combined, it would mean a lot more than some blurted comment at the end of a press conference as you're walking away. And to me, it would be a lot more reassuring, and I'd sleep better.
And these are actionable things to do. That, as you said, they are. Part of the issue we run into with the Department of Defense is they don't do small ball. So that's why I asked if you had anyone in particular in mind who kind of fit that bill. Huh?
It's a great
What's
idea,
that?
but it's a great idea, but I think Senator Cotton would have a very good idea of who that would be.
Yeah.
I mean,
no,
I
think that's
refer
true.
to the experts.
And just a quick final thought on it. Your comment about joint weapons development, I think, is really significant. And, you add into that the Japanese, and you add in even potentially the Australians. And we're talking about a serious capability that is about to dawn, funded in large part by Taiwan. That's a very reasonable thing to expect. And also providing the engineers and the brilliant people who are there, and then forcing this stake that everyone has in the island, that today on October, as we're on the eve of October 10th, Taiwan's National Day, that stake isn't in the ground firmly. And for Taiwan into the future, which is how we began with a look to the future, I think it's an important component of how Taiwan continues to thrive and remain separate from the mainland.
The only thing I would add to that is keep New Zealand out of it because they haven't done the legwork.
Yeah. No, it's Australia.
It's like, and they've also breached a little bit of the Five Eyes stuff, and I don't like that personally. But I think bringing Australia is a really good idea, and partly because you've got to get these countries used to the idea that if there's a Pacific War, you really have to supply. America will protect the sea lanes. That's the one thing we're going to do. Okay, and you have to supply these things to Taiwan. You have to get used to that idea of linking up these countries more closely, and not being bullied by China on this, because that's all China ever does.
That's what they do.
That's what they do. And so, I guess those are my main points. I mean, though I do have this feeling like, look, I mean, there's one other thing that I think needs to be said, and we're not kind of saying it in America. But I got this from a guy who works at Beijing, not the consulate, I guess it would be the embassy, and does a lot of the military stuff there. And he came over to Taiwan, he talked to me, and he told me that there's this theory in China that among people he actually knows and works with and has lunch with and stuff like that, that he likes. And they say that the CCP leadership is saying that the Taiwan's resistance to unification with China is actually being led by 10% of the Taiwanese population. And the reason for that is those 10% have partial Japanese ancestry.
Oh my goodness.
Right. So
they're turning racial.
Yeah. So in the wake of a successful invasion, right, the Taiwanese elite should expect that the Chinese Communist Party will neutralize or incarcerate approximately 2.5 million Taiwanese citizens with Japanese blood.
Wow.
They've given you the number. That's what I mean. It's like very significant with China. A lot of the stuff they put out is nonsense, of course, and it's this horrible sort of communist language, and it's terrible to read. I pity the people like you, Jackie, who can read Chinese. You poor thing. You'd be stuck doing this all the time. But the truth is, when they put out a number that's very significant, that 10% tells you exactly what they intend to do to Taiwan. That's how many people they will eliminate.
Disappear. Yeah.
They will disappear.
All right. Yeah. I'm putting a lid on this because we could go all night. I know the two of you will just back and forth all night. So I want to give you a chance, Ethan. I know you're writing another book to plug that.
Okay. It's called The Slaughter 2. No, it's called The Xinjiang Procedure. My agent didn't like the title. And it's about the organ harvesting of the Uyghurs, and in many cases Kazakhs as well, in China. And that's its goal, but it's a lot more than that. The first chapter doesn't talk about organ harvesting at all. It's a big surprise. It's a punch in your face, but it should be an entertaining book. It also goes into investigative methods that were used to do the book, which had to be much more complicated because China's gotten much more aggressive and complicated in not letting one talk to people who've been in their camps and so forth, their terrible camps. So that's what's coming up, and I hope to have it out certainly by Easter. So
awesome. And then for our front, the Montgomery County Republican Club will be hosting an event tomorrow night with former Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker. And I believe you can still RSVP for that if you go to the club's website. Maryland.
Actually, they have until midnight tonight.
Midnight tonight. All right, got to get on it then. MontgomeryCountyRepublicanClub.com. I will put on my plug for my young Republicans. Our Christmas Gala is December 20th. God help me, 5 days before Christmas. But it's going to be at the Links to the Chaladon in Mount Airy and Carroll County. So please come out for that. We're doing a hot chocolate honor this year, which I'm very proud of. And I am keeping my promise that I had when I was elected chairman to never serve chicken at a single event that I ever do. So come for dinner, barbecue chicken. Yeah, and we will.
And happy Taiwan National Day tomorrow.
Happy Taiwan National Day.
Yeah, happy Taiwan National Day.
I thought you were going to say Happy Jewish New Year because, China-Taiwan as well, right? And
we have so many holidays this time of year. It's ridiculous, right? It's true.
Hanukkah's on Christmas this year. It just all lines up. Well, that'll do it for us, and we'll be back next week with another guest. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Cheers.
Great show, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ethan.